Okay, I've started recording. I want to welcome everyone, all 61 of you, to the February 2021 meeting of the World's Fair Society. I think most of you know I'm Mike Truax. We do have a few guests here, and this is our second virtual meeting, and the first one we ran by ourselves. So I want to thank David and Cindy for helping out with that. They'll be watching the waiting room and harvesting questions to be asked at the end, and we'll cover that in a minute. This year is the 117th anniversary of the 1904 World's Fair, and it's the 35th anniversary of the Society. So tonight I'm going to be telling you about a number of really neat and fascinating aspects of the World's Fair. While I normally ask for new attendees to introduce themselves, I will ask any visitors we have to wave their hands for about 5 seconds or so. And if you want to, you can go into the gallery view. If you put the mouse in the upper right corner of your black frame, you can go to the gallery view, or you can stay into the presenter view. And I'm both the host and the presenter tonight, so I'm wearing multiple hats. And we'll go from that. Anybody waving as a new person? And for the 10 or 15 people that may have joined in the last 10 minutes or so, I welcomed Bruce Millinger, who's down in Australia, and I forgot what city he's in, but he gets his bulletins a week or so late. Someone forwards them to him so we don't have to pay the international postage to get to him, but he's a charter member that goes way back. Okay, for those guests, a minute or so about the Society. The World's Fair Society was established in 1986 as a nonprofit organization to promote the memory of the fair. We publish a monthly bulletin. We hold monthly meetings, kind of like this, but it's much better when you're in person. Everyone gets to ask questions and make fun of me. We have a lot of other efforts besides doing promotional programs. So if you're interested, go to our website, and there's a membership form on the website. I have a few announcements to pass to everyone. First of all, everyone except the hosts should be muted. You do have the ability to unmute yourself, but if you do, please keep it quiet, because dogs or cats or side conversations sometimes carry further than you want. Also, if you have any questions, over on the right, you can activate the chat sidebar, and you can see the participants and a chat window on the right side of your screen. To see that chat, just move your mouse towards the bottom of your screen, and you'll see a little balloon, a comic strip balloon that says chat. Click on that, and you'll have the place where you can type your questions. And we'll have some additional chat time at the end of the presentation after I get tired of talking. First, some good news. I hope that most Society members who were members in 2020 have not only received your February bulletin, but that the 2020 members have also received their special gift in a tube. If you were a member last year and you have not received something in the mail, feel free to send either myself or Sharon Mercer a little note, and we can start tracking it through the post office. But there's a special membership gift that has been sent to 2020 members, and I've heard from a lot of people that have received it. They were mailed out around the 1st of February, but with the post office, you never know. Bruce, you may see yours by Easter or so. And I hate not having any feedback. That would have gotten a chuckle at a real meeting. Be sure and visit the Society website and our Facebook group page regularly. That's got information about the fair, links, and also has several years worth of meeting photos and event pictures. The Facebook group has over 4,000 members, and it provides a great discussion forum, and sometimes some answers there too. I try to get answers out there for most of those. Also, if you're one of the, 50 or 60 people who haven't renewed yet, your last bulletin is the one that you just got, the February issue. It probably has a sticker on it. Please fill out the renewal form and send it back into the address on the form. Okay, moving on to the pre-presentation. I'd like to set the stage for tonight with a little bit of fair history from 117 years ago. It was February 17th, 1904, and it was a Wednesday. The fair would open in about 2 months, and the pace of working the final construction details and exhibit setup was reaching a peak. Thousands, in fact, maybe over 10,000 construction workers were working on finishing the palaces and the large state and exhibit buildings and the Pike concessions, and, oh, by the way, installing probably tens of thousands of exhibits in all the palaces. Another news item was that a newspaper report said that two very rich, famous families would host an exhibit. And I have yet to verify this. I didn't have time. The Goulds and the Rockefellers would have a joint exhibit in the Mines and Metallurgy building. And no, they weren't going to show off their jewels. They were going to showcase their investments in the coal and iron fields out in Colorado. Workers began erecting the wireless telegraph tower used by the DeForest Wireless Telegraph Company. It would be 250 feet tall, and it came to us from Buffalo, New York, and that's why it's sometimes called the Buffalo Tower. It was erected right near Niagara Falls, and everyone thought it was a good place to go up 250 feet and watch Niagara Falls until a really cold winter came. And if you've been to Niagara Falls, you know there's all sorts of mist and water all the time. And if the wind is out of the north, all that mist would have blown towards where that tower was and formed ice on the steel beams of that tower. Guess what happened when the sun came out? That ice started melting, and you'd have 2, 3, 4 foot long pieces of ice falling 200 feet onto a building and people below. So they decided that wasn't a good place to put a tower, and it became available, and it came to the World's Fair. During the fair, it beamed messages about the fair to downtown St. Louis and as far away as Chicago. Finally, the Jefferson Guard unceremoniously booted a salesman from the administration building. This salesman claimed to have built a perpetual motion machine. Crackpot inventors and exhibitors had filled the halls seeking permission to show their various exhibits, and most of them were shown the exits. And now it's time for our program. Again, I'd like to remind you, if you have any questions about the program, to type them into the window or just make a note, and we'll try to get them a little bit later. And I'm going to seize control. I'm going to remind David that I'm going to start recording right now. And I guess I did a minute or two ago, so I can pause or stop the recording. It's apparently going on my computer. I want to tell you guys a little bit about myself as a presenter. I had a career in the Air Force where I was a pilot, and I was also a computer program manager for 23 years. I ended up coming to St. Louis over what some people call Scott Field, but it's Scott Air Force Base back in 1989. I ended up retiring in the 90s and then continuing to work for several different companies associated with computer management. And in the mid-90s, I found out about the World's Fair. And I went, wow, this is amazing. And the reason I discovered the society is that I was given a small piece of ruby flash, similar to this little thing here. It was a toothpick holder, though, not a little creamer, that had my great-great-aunt's name on it, and she had gone to the fair. So I started looking into the fair and discovered the society's website back then. And I went, holy cow, I can't believe they built all that in 2.5 years. So I joined the society, and I've been enamored and researching the fair ever since. So with that, I'm going to share my screen, and I'm going to go to PowerPoint. And I'm going to go to full screen. Okay, so hopefully everyone sees my screen that has a World's Fair flag with a title at the top. And you can still see, hopefully, I see a small gallery of 4 or 5 people over on the side. Hopefully that matches what everyone else is seeing. And if not, send us a chat message or call one of the co-hosts. So the 1904 World's Fair had its own flag. It featured a blue field with the fleur-de-lis and 14 stars on the left for the states and territories in the purchase territory. It also had broad stripes of red, white, and yellow representing the colors and the flags of those territories. Several different flags were submitted and rejected, including this one, which interestingly has the stars in the upper left, and in the lower right, it has a design that's similar to the St. Louis flag, kind of showing the two rivers coming together. Especially for our new people, to put our fair in perspective, in the Victorian World's Fairs from the 1850s or 70s up to about 1915, St. Louis was the biggest and came right in the middle of it. You can see that there were many of them over in Europe and a whole bunch of them over in the United States to celebrate the centennial and the discovery of America by Columbus, the Louisiana Purchase, the Lewis and Clark Exposition, etc. The location in Forest Park, this is a map of the World's Fair that's been cropped and oriented with north at the top, so it looks a little bit upside down, but I've pointed out the some of the main landmarks of the World's Fair, and we'll come back to this picture in just a moment. This is a map of the same area with north at the top, showing Forest Park in the right 2/3. Skinker kind of goes north and south. And David, can you tell me if you see my mouse going up and down Skinker right now?
Yes, it is working.
Okay, is it a small mouse, teeny tiny, or is it kind of a big one?
Standard size.
Okay. I tried to make it bigger so everyone can see it. And then in the upper left is Washington University out here. And those landmarks are still pointing at the same place, like the Grand Basin right in the middle of the screen. So when we bring the World's Fair map back on today's street map, you can see that the western half of Forest Park became part of the fairgrounds, but all of this land out here to the west of Skinker was leased private land for the World's Fair. Obviously, we wanted to make a fantastic World's Fair, and so they designed a lot of palaces that were anywhere from 9 to 20 acres in size. And since they were going to make them fast and make them out of wood and put staff on the outside to make them look really fancy, they basically had to put a shell of a building on the outside to do all that. So if you look at this ladder going up the side, that's how people would get up to where they're doing the construction of one of the major palaces. They used 90 million feet of pine in constructing the World's Fair, the framework and the two buildings. In fact, on this one, on the curved facade, you can actually see the framework for several columns. But however, the little boy with, I guess, his box of Cracker Jacks is not really interested in all of that stuff going on in the background. But everything got covered in staff, and you're going to see in a minute a picture of how much staff there was. I can't just conceive of how many tons there were. So this is a picture taken from the roof line of Mines and Metallurgy, looking down across what would be the sunken gardens, but it's filled with water right now at the construction of liberal arts going on with those little columns and stuff there. And I hope this works properly. I've tested it a few times. And my screen's going to change and bring me into this map on the public library website. So there's the same image with the pond in the front. And just to take a look at the scale of the lumber, I'm going to zoom in down here where my cursor is, so you can see all these piles of lumber. I think those are at least 8 by 8 or maybe 8 by 10, probably 10 or 15 feet long pieces of lumber. Here's some planking that's being used to make the floor. And as we go over, you can see some different shapes and sizes of lumber that is all going to be lifted up to build these humongous towers and the framework for the roof and the trusses on the roof. And this is just one of about 10 major palaces. And when I see a picture like this, it just, to use the expression, makes me shake my head of how did they do that with how many people and the army that it took to put this all together.
Hey, Mike, it's not zooming for us. Is it zooming on one of your screens, but not another or something?
Well, I'm zooming in and out on the picture, going into the lumber.
I'll just sit closer to the computer. Than
Yeah, it's,
No, it's
Mike.
not doing it.
yeah, we're just seeing a stable picture.
Huh. Well, maybe this feature just works on mine.
Yeah, your mouse is not visible like it was on that prior one.
Right, that's correct.
Okay. Well, let me. Okay. Well,
Now I see your mouse, but it's not moving.
okay. Well, I'll just go back to the screen and I guess I'll have to,
Just continue on, Mike. We appreciate what you got.
I'll just talk to the main pictures and won't try any more zooming. Okay? Thanks for the info. That's the kind of things that we weren't sure if it's going to work, but you can see all this lumber lined up that I was talking about and zooming in on, you know, alongside the building. And just think of the effort it took to lift that all up, et cetera. So if we were over here to the right on Government Hill, about where the fountain is, and looking over the sunken gardens, this is the view. I want that to go away. Oh, here we go. Okay. We back at the full screen view now?
It's the same view we've had. It's full screen.
Yeah. Okay. So there's the next view from Government Hill looking over the sunken gardens. And the palace we were looking at, Liberal Arts, is on the right. And if you look at the statue that's closest to you and the people next to the base of the statue, look at how tall the statue was. Look at how tall the building was. Look at the roof line and look at the statues on top of the roof. Look at the obelisks on the left. They're 140 feet tall in front of mines and metallurgy. Unbelievable. So one of the things that the World's Fair decided they were going to do is feature aviation competitions for the highest kite, the biggest kite, the ability to fly for the longest amount of time, powered flight, got to take off and land. And they had a $100,000 prize if anybody could complete a 30-mile L-shaped course 3 times on different days at 20 miles an hour. Later, it was reduced to 15 miles an hour, and come back and land near the starting point. So the circle at the bottom right is where you would start, and you would go fly around a tethered balloon at A2 and then go all the way up to the top, about 10 miles to A3, and come back to the starting point. And that would qualify you for the $100,000 prize. You had to do that 3 times. Guess what? No one came close. However, Thomas Baldwin of San Francisco designed, built, and demonstrated the airship California Aero. Since he weighed well over 200 pounds, he selected a bicyclist, Roy Nabenshoe, who had never been up in the air, to pilot this and taught him how to do it. So Roy Nabenshoe became the pilot who took the thing on a couple of small test rides. But then on October 31st, 1904, he flew the California Aero at altitudes up to about 2,000 feet over the exposition. That's the height of 3 gateway arches. He turned and circled and flew both with and against the wind. And then he finished and he came back to his takeoff spot, demonstrating a complete controlled flight. There he is coming down. You can see him on the back of the little contraption. You can see a rudder behind him, a big white panel in front of the fence. And you can see the propeller turning around on front with the little motor. How'd you like to go up as high as the arch, double or triple, in a contraption like that? Oh, notice he's not wearing a parachute either. He was awarded a grand prize and I think $500 for the accomplishment. So the Pike was a mile-long entertainment district, which didn't get really organized until early 1903 when they rented that land where the mansions are between Washington University and Skinker all the way over to De Bolivar. One of the notable exhibits was Jim Key, a Hambletonian Arabian horse that performed at various expositions. He raised money for the American SPCA. He and his trainer, William Key, had been together for many years. Jim Key could read, write, spell, answer math questions, run a post office, make change, and answer Bible questions. It was never proven if Jim Key was being signaled by his trainer, although he would occasionally leave the stage and let someone else take over, or if he really was that intelligent. The Pike also had many rides, such as the Scenic Railway, a 3-mile roller coaster that went outside the fairgrounds with many hills and dips. Under and Over the Sea took people on a simulated submarine ride to Paris, up an elevator in the Eiffel Tower, and a return to St. Louis by airship going through a thunderstorm. It also had reproductions of many lands, such as Ireland here with Cormac's Castle and Blarney's Castle, and they would have things like theaters, performances, souvenir stands, and restaurants. People had to eat, right? The Tyrolean Alps was an entire village with restaurants, rides, a fake mountain, and inside the fake mountain was a very large restaurant that could seat over 2,000 people. And several different countries in Asia could be visited, the food sampled, and entertainment viewed. There was Mysterious Asia and Fair Japan and the Chinese Village and stuff like that. It was just a place to go see the world in your own backyard. I think we all know about the Floral Clock and how big it was, 112 feet in diameter. The minute hand is 74 feet long and weighed 2,700 pounds. And every minute it was triggered to move and it would tick off a minute, which was about 5 feet apart at the tip of the hand. The pavilions at the top contained several mechanisms from left to right. A 5,000-pound bell was rung every 30 minutes. In the center pavilion, there was a globe that accurately turned as time would go by during the day. The pneumatic trigger and mechanism in the middle would receive a signal every 60 seconds and drive the minute hand via a 4-inch steel rod extending down to the middle of the Floral Clock. And then, of course, to the right of that is the masterworks to the Floral Clock, which the Society owns is on exhibit at the History Museum. And finally, in another small pavilion is an hourglass that would be turned over and reversed every hour. Oh, there's our masterworks right there. So mostly in the Palace of Agriculture, which was over 20 acres, there were all sorts of amazing displays of food. Missouri built a 2-story corn palace. Lot's wife was sculptured in salt. And Mississippi showed a statue, 30-foot statue of King Cotton. They were one of the biggest producers of cotton. Not to be outdone, California made a prune bear 10 feet tall, and somebody counted 14,265 prunes. And there was a horse made out of hops. California also made an elephant out of almonds to showcase that crop. Now, refrigeration was fairly new, and they discovered that if you make it really, really cold, that you could sculpture in butter. So here's Father Hennepin at the source of the Mississippi, where the first falls were, Teddy Roosevelt on horseback, and milking a cow. And wherever you have somebody milking a cow, you're just liable to have a little cat nearby. I think we all know that the Liberty Bell came to St. Louis. It arrived June 8th for a 5-month stay. It was the first time the Liberty Bell traveled west of the Mississippi, even though it had previously gone to a couple of other World's Fairs. There was a big parade in St. Louis. 75,000 school children greeted the bell as it arrived, and it stayed here until the middle of November. Of course, it was displayed in the Pennsylvania building. On its travel to and from St. Louis by train, the bell was greeted with very high honors in every little town it passed through, with bands and crowds and ceremonies and stuff like that. It was kind of like the president or the Pope coming through St. Genevieve, maybe. We'd be remiss if we didn't mention the third Olympiad. After suitable bargaining, the 1904 Olympics was transferred from Chicago to St. Louis, and that's a story in and of itself. And a myriad of sports were held both in the stadium, and this is one of the first concrete stadiums built in the United States. The life-saving lake was also used for swimming and diving, etc. And the St. Louis Olympics were the first to, here's some of the competitions going on in the stadium, a hurdles race, the long jump, and weightlifting. And the St. Louis Olympics were the first to award gold, silver, and bronze medals in the Olympics to the best performing athletes. Before that, they had just designated, I think, the first through fifth or sixth place in a lot of the competitions. Americans dominated, as over 85% of the 651 athletes were Americans. Because of the distance other athletes had to travel from Europe, it just wasn't worthwhile for them to spend 7 to 10 days traveling to come to just a few days of competition at that, the third Olympiad. George Poag was the first African American to win medals in the Olympics. He won 2 bronze medals on the same day in hurdles. George Iser, though, really beat him. He won 6 medals in gymnastics in one day, despite having a wooden prosthetic leg. He won 3 gold, 2 silver, and a bronze in one day. Helen Keller came to the World's Fair. She was born in Alabama in 1880. 19 months old, she was afflicted with either scarlet fever and meningitis, which left her deaf and blind. At the age of 7, she finally learned to communicate from Annie Sullivan and became quite educated. She attended the Royal Institute for the Blind in 1888 and graduated from Radcliffe at the age of 24, becoming the first deaf and blind person to earn a Bachelor of Arts degree. When she visited the fair on Tuesday, October 18th, a special Helen Keller Day was declared to promote education for the deaf. She's mainly remembered being an advocate for people with disabilities, but she was a world-famous speaker, author, suffragist, a pacifist, and a birth control supporter. She died in her sleep in June 1968, nearly 88 years old. And you got a peek at that. Geronimo was also at the World's Fair. He was a famous Indian warrior in American history. He was reported to have taken about 100 scalps. He was captured in 1886, 18 years before the fair. He was a federal prisoner and was taken to the fair under guard, although at his age then, he wasn't much of a threat to escape or anything. And he had his own little tent. You could buy his photograph and maybe autograph for 10 cents, or you could pose with him and take a picture for 50 cents, or you could even buy his hat off his head for $2. Once you got your money and you left the tent, he'd take a new hat out of a box and put it on. After the World's Fair, President Roosevelt invited him to march in his 1905 inauguration parade, and he did so in full Indian regalia. So the Gerhard sisters, who had a St. Louis photographic studio, took a studio photo of him in 1904 displaying his dignity. And some 100 years after the fair, the glass plate negative was looked at under high resolution and closely examined. And this is the negative that they made. And the eyeball there is blown up. And if you really look close at the eyeball, you can make out the photographer in a white blouse kind of leaning over towards the camera. Pretty good detail for 1904. Another thing that we've had a program about, in fact, there's a video, we may have to watch that sometime in the next year or so. The Fort Shaw Indian School girls basketball team came to the fair. Around 1900, the United States was working to assimilate teenage Indians into the American culture at many Western Indian schools, such as this one. Not politically correct nowadays with 2020 hindsight, but it's felt that it would bring the young Indians up to American civilization standards. The girls' basketball team at Fort Shaw excelled in this new sport, which was quite different from today's game. You were only allowed one dribble, so there was a lot of passing and a premium on shooting. They played their way to the 1904 World's Fair, winning games and earning money, and they also performed Shakespearean pantomimes before the games, posing as portions of Shakespeare were read. They beat all the teams on the way to the fair, and in St. Louis, they competed in a 4-team women's basketball competition, and they won the World's Fair Championship trophy, beating an all-star Missouri girls team 2-0 at the World's Fair. So here's a little bit of trivia for you. If you drive around Forest Park, the picture on the left is from the Pike, and the picture on the right is from the road right at the bottom of the Grand Basin that goes by, where you can look across the Grand Basin. There's fire hydrants stuck out in the middle of the golf course and stuff like that. Seem kind of out of place, but they once protected World's Fair buildings. Most of the original hydrants have been replaced with new caps, but they connect to the original pipes until we have another 2 or 3 hard freezes like we've had lately, and we end up with water main breaks all over the place. And of course, we got to talk just a little bit about Festival Hall, the fair's centerpiece, designed by Cass Gilbert. He also designed the St. Louis Central Library. It could seat 3,500 people for concerts. The dome was bigger than St. Peter's in Rome, 200 feet in diameter. It was partly covered in gold leaf, and you can kind of see the, I think what's meant to be blue skylights and the gold around the trim of it. The scale was immense. And in this photo, which is a sharper real photo, you can see the people climbing up the stairs and ramps going up to the entrance to Festival Hall, which was behind the Cascades on the left. The Cascades are where the water is coming out of and flowing into a pool, and then down all sorts of layers of smaller pools, and there were fountains shooting water all over the place. Flower beds lined it all the way up and down. There were 3 cascades, and I'll go back 1 slide so you can see the bottom of the one on the left here coming down from one of the restaurant pavilions. There were 3 cascades that focused in on the Grand Basin, and they used 45,000 gallons of water a minute tumbling down into the Grand Basin. And of course, another thing special about Festival Hall is that inside Festival Hall was the world's largest organ. It had over 10,000 pipes. It took 14 train cars to ship all the pipes and console and framework from the manufacturer in Los Angeles. And the Los Angeles Art Organ Company was bankrupted by the cost overruns producing this thing. The console had 5 manuals or keyboards, 140 stops, and 239 movements. Famous organists from all over the world gave concerts, including the famed Felix Alexander Guimont from France, who was widely recognized as the world's greatest organist. After the World's Fair, the organ was taken apart and put in a warehouse where it sat for 4 or 5 years. And John Wanamaker had built a big department store in Philadelphia, and he wanted a musical instrument. He already had an organ in the store, but it wasn't a big one. He wanted one that would fill up his 6-story grand court. So he purchased this organ, and over the course of about 25 years, up to 1930, he expanded it several times, so it grew from about 10,000 pipes to 28,000 pipes. It's a National Historic Landmark in Macy's Grand Court, and it's still played twice daily. The longest pipe is 32 feet long, and one of the wooden pipes was photographed with a small baby Shetland pony in it. So the Ferris wheel, we know, was built for the Chicago World's Fair in 1893 and operated up there. It was purchased by the Chicago House Wrecking Company at a salvage sale for just $8,150 in 1901. And rather than just start destroying it, they knew that there was a World's Fair maybe going to be held in St. Louis. So they got in touch with the organizers who were looking for a signature piece of architecture or structure for our fair. They struck an agreement with the LPE Commission, and they brought they deconstructed the Ferris wheel in Chicago, transported it on 175 train cars, and put it back together here in St. Louis in about 2 months of construction. The 36 cars are each 27 feet long, 13 feet wide, and 9 feet high. That's about the size of half of a 2-car garage. If you put 2 cars side by side, you'd have a full 2-car garage. And the axle, of course, as many of us know, weighed 71 tons. So the Great Ferris Wheel with its 36 cars hosted a wedding on the first day it was open, which was May 30th, I believe, in 1904, about a month after the fair opened. And the next day it hosted another wedding. So they began thinking about, boy, we could rent a car and, allow weddings to take place. And numerous weddings did take place, perhaps 30 different weddings. One couple got married sitting on ponies. There was a double wedding that took place, etc. And one brave couple had a platform constructed on top of, whoops, I'll get to that in a minute. I hope I didn't lose that one. I'm going to scan a few slides here real quick. Here we go. One brave couple had a platform constructed on top of one of the cars, and their wedding party of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 people stood in a little platform, and they conducted their wedding vows. So I want to show a few shots of fair construction. Here it is just getting started, and since you can't see my zooming in over Zoom, I guess Zoom doesn't like zooming. This one is kind of neat because it shows a car down here, and here's a man standing on one of the beams, and I think they're lifting up another support beam to be attached up here, and there's 1 or 2 people up here where I'm moving my mouse, hopefully you can see, getting ready to put it together.
Hey, Mike, this is Doug. Can you get out of your presentation and go to your link and then show that page perhaps?
Well, I'm out of the presentation now, but I think it's the History Museum and their way of doing a pop-up that when I click on this little thing right here to expand it, I don't think you all see the pop-up.
No, apparently not. Okay.
That's a good question, because I can zoom in here and I can see 5 or 6 people putting together that beam right down there. So we'll just have to pass on zooming, unfortunately.
Mike, it's Cindy. When you shared your screen, did you just share a PowerPoint or did you share your screen?
That's a good question. Tell you what, I will do this and that will give me a different window. I thought I shared the whole screen. Let me look at that, a little later after I finish the presentation. Okay, I'll come back to that. This photo is one that's widely reproduced because you can clearly make out one person over here to the left of the axle. And over here on the right, there's where you see some extra supports and stuff, there's a little team of people doing some construction. And I'm going to click on it so I can come back to it afterwards. hopefully expeditiously, and show you some zooming. And then the last shot of zooming is one that's almost a little bit further along. And up here near the top, where the outer wheel is not completed, you can see about 3 or 4 people. There's actually 5 or 6 up there using these temporary cranes to lift pieces up and get them connected. And I'll click on that so I have that one available afterwards. Okay. After the construction was done, we saw that already. Here's a shot from the River City Casino that I had never seen before. And as I looked at that, I looked at the Ferris wheel and I wondered, what were those little glary lights that are poking out to the side? Wondered if someone had a spotlight or searchlight or something like that. Steve Schmitz then spotted something on one of the cars on one of his stereo views of the Ferris wheel and went, I wonder what that little thing is. It looks like kind of a modified R2-D2 or something. And he found he had another picture showing something on top of one of the wheels. So with a little more research, we found out that there was a comment in Wikipedia and Wayfair that said the 10 kilocandle spotlight was used on the Ferris wheel at the 1904 World's Fair and is now on top of a tower at the Lakeside Amusement Park in Denver, Colorado. Diane, I don't know if you heard about that, or don't know if that got into your book, or maybe that's something people can't go see because it's up in their dome. Okay, so after the fair, they had to do something with the Ferris wheel because it was in the forest park land and it had to be removed. As the contract said, the park had to be restored. They said, we'll leave it in place and build an amusement park around it. And the people that owned the land just across Skinker said, no way. They offered to sell it to a couple of other amusement parks who probably could have recouped their deconstruction, transportation, and reconstruction costs in about 2 years. And both Coney Island and Forest Park said no. So they decided that they would sell it as scrap. And by now it was 1906. The fair was really being taken apart and there wasn't much left. And so on May 6th, 1906, they knew what the value of all the steel was their only alternative. And so with 100 pounds of dynamite, they demolished the Ferris wheel. The axle ended up kind of sticking in the ground. And then they started cutting up all of these pieces of scrap and probably shipping them off to be melted down and reused. And the urban legend and mystery for years has been, where's the axle? Most people thought it was buried somewhere in Forest Park, although there's half a dozen other stories of it being taken here and taken there and buried under Wydown School, buried under Skinker, etc. Some people have said it was too heavy to move. So here's a summary of why it wasn't impossible to move. It had been moved 3 times. It wasn't too heavy because the same company that owned it moved it from Chicago down here. The train tracks were still in place, and the removal of the axle wasn't newsworthy. It was just more salvage material, so it wasn't something that got published in the newspaper or anything. And there's a bunch of documentation from the Chicago House Wrecking Company that Steve Schmitz has gotten a hold of that put a value on everything. It's the owners of the company said, no, we're not going to leave it behind or, sell it cheap. It's worth money. We can't cut it up right now because the torches aren't good enough, but they'll get better. And so here's a letter from Mr. Harris to Mr. Reardon, and they were both officers in the wrecking company. And there's a paragraph here that said, at that time, it could not be disposed of for junk because of the special hardening of the steel. It remained in our yard until 1918 or 19, when the acetylene torches were better and it was cut up and sold for scrap. This is a 1951 letter. 40 odd years, 45 years after the fair. And Steve called me one time in the evening a couple of weeks ago, all excited that he had found this information in the Clinton, Illinois Register, that they had sent a reporter down in January 1906 to look at what was left of the fair. And it noted that the last of the Ferris wheel has been taken away. The 70-ton steel axle, which embedded itself deep in the ground, was pulled from its resting place by a huge derrick. They had to blow the flanges off just to make it probably easier to load on a car, because it had been transported with the flanges on it before. So this is a contemporary news report of the axle being put on a car, contemporary being 1904 or right after the fair, and being loaded on a train car to go back to Chicago. And we hope to publish this as a news release and get hopefully some of the media in St. Louis interested in that, and hopefully get some publicity and interviews like that. But it makes Steve and I convinced. And Steve, if you want to unmute yourself, if I've missed anything or whatever, I think that raised our certainty that the axle isn't buried and went back to Chicago from about 95% to 96 or 98% or so. Are you there, Steve? Okay, I guess not. Okay, so some legacies from the World's Fair. Clean water. During the fair, it looked something like this, and I think we've all heard the Mark Twain reference of too thick to drink and too thin to plow, which was applied to many different rivers out here in the West. They needed a better filtration system, so they didn't want dirty water going down the Cascades and making all the statues brown. So John Wixford, an engineer with the sanitation department, came up with the solution of using more lime and chemicals. And they, about 5 or 6 weeks before the fair opened, they were producing clean water and ready to send it out to the fair. This is a picture that Linda Daviar found and gave to us. I've never seen published anywhere. It's taken from the Washington building, the big tall TP Washington building, looking towards Festival Hall. The dome is in the center. And right in the middle of it is a picture of a building I had never seen a photograph of before at the time, 15, 17 years ago. That's the Portland Cement Building. Turns out the Portland Cement Building was not taken down. Guess what? Because it was made out of cement blocks and cement after the fair. And it ended up being on the grounds of the St. Louis Zoo, who converted it to use for their veterinary facilities, and obviously let ivy grow on it and things like that. But not too far from that was the Great Flight Cage, which was built by the Smithsonian to hold many exotic birds in 1904. If you look on the right side, in the right edge of this picture, you can see a vertical wall, and that vertical wall goes over an arched enclosure that people would walk through, and they could see the small side over here where the large birds were, including some ibises, egrets. I don't know if they had flamingos back then. Maybe there's a couple of them, I'm not sure, kind of further away, back by that trainer who's feeding them. But the city of St. Louis, after the fair, purchased the bird cage just before it was going to be taken apart by the Smithsonian. I think they paid $3,500 for it. They got a few pairs of ducks or something, but that became the impetus for the zoo, which began in 1910. And one other remnant we have of the World's Fair, of course, is the Grand Basin. Looks a little bit different today with trees around it, but those trees are probably comparable in height to the Palace of Education and Social Economy over there. And these two views were taken from about the same place, where you can see the three Cascades in the top picture coming down. And all you see now is the green of Art Hill. And of course, there was one other thing that was built for the fair that became the St. Louis Art Museum, which was built to be permanent. And I'm going to show you how it looks in 1904 in this picture. On the far left, you can see one of the annexes that was built to be fireproof, but temporary and taken down. The art museum was built out of limestone, but take a look as we blend here, watch the chimney and the statue that's in this little alcove right here, because here's what it looks like today towards sunset. Statues are still up here over the entryway. The griffins were added. No statue here. Chimneys are gone. Going back to 1904. So here's two remnants from the fair, although it's arguable that the statue of St. Louis was not at the fair. It was reconstructed after the fair in bronze and placed on a marble statue, but it looks just like it did in 1904, as I'll show you in a minute. And it wasn't unveiled until I think 1906, and that's a story in and of itself about the recasting of it. And of course, the art museum behind it. So here's the statue as it looks today, taken at night. And the statue as it looked in 1904, and there was a subgroup in front of the base, whoops, down here, of the guiding spirits talking to St. Louis. The center statue, which was meant to be St. Louis, and they're telling, whispering in her ear that genius points, inspiration whispers, nothing impossible. That was kind of an unofficial motto of the fair. And going back to today, that's what it looks like. So whenever I see those, I'd love to go back to 1904 and see what it looked like. I'd love to see what this looked like too, to see the festival hall and the Cascades reflecting in the Grand Basin and the colors slowly changing from white to red to green. But it's gone. We still have the memories. And that finishes up my presentation. David, Cindy, any questions in the chat room?
I do not see any.
I do not either.
Well, I
Okay.
have one.
Okay, go ahead. Who's that?
This is Jana. Earlier, when you were talking about you and Steve investigating what happened to the Grand Wheel, do you think that is it possible that the fact of the matter that the axle fell plop after the wheel was demolished and it fell into the ground and stuck there, do you think that that could possibly be the source of the urban legend about the axle being buried in Forest Park?
I don't believe so. Steve, if you're still on, if you want to unmute, you can contribute to this, but the fact that it was stuck in the ground 8 or 10 feet and out of 45 feet long just kind of left it at an angle, and the Chicago House Wrecking Company knew how to, what's the right word? They knew how to move heavy things. And one of their descendants, as recently as about 20 or 30 years ago, wrote an article that moving something that weighed that much would not have been a problem for them. That news article also talked about that they blew the flanges off to make it easier to move.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't think the fact that it stuck in the ground, would have been a problem. I'm going to try stopping the share for a second. Now I can see everyone again. And
Mike,
yes,
it's Larry Gross. I wanted to elaborate on something.
sure.
You changed the view. You had that picture of the cement building,
Yes,
the one that was at the zoo.
yes.
I don't know whether members remember Denise Rogers. She was an older lady.
Yeah.
She was a member, and her father, not her grandfather, her father, his name was Hugh Brassell, Brussel. And he was an architect, a civil engineer, and a structural engineer. And I'm reading now. It's important to the fair as he introduced reinforced concrete to the United States through that building, the Missouri Portland Cement Building, using it what at the time was a revolutionary material. And so we had a society member whose father was directly involved with building some of the fair. He also built the hanging stairway in the Mines and Metallurgy building, and with other structures that used his reinforced concrete. He was 26 at the time of the fair. And Denise had said that her dad was so proud of that building, but when they took it down for the zoo station, she said it broke her heart.
Well, that certainly was a, structure from the fair that remained. And I remember Louise telling me about that when I mentioned the 2 or 3 things left from the fair. She'd always go, "Don't forget the cement building." I went,
Yeah.
"Building, I've never seen it."
Now, you wouldn't have, you weren't here at the time.
No.
Yeah, most of us, I think, who visited the zoo when we were younger do remember that building. It was kind of vine covered, as you showed. And I think it had a bathroom in it
Could be.
at that time.
I'm going to try sharing my screen to show you one of the Ferris wheel pictures and see if I can zoom in on it. Any luck on seeing a Ferris wheel picture from the public library?
We see the Ferris wheel picture.
Okay. Did it change at all? Do you see it closer?
Yeah, no, it's further away.
It's
It's
centered better.
Okay. So can you see me zooming in on the top of it?
All right, now it's zooming.
Yeah, and you can see the people standing there being completely out of their minds.
Looks like it gets a little crowded over here at the base of these temporary derricks that are built out of wood that they're, looks like they're lifting up another piece of steel to be put in place. And how about this guy here? This looks like a piece of lumber that's probably 30 feet long going between the two things, because that's longer than the length of a car.
Yeah.
Just sitting on. This guy's standing up there holding on to something. This guy's hugging his pulley.
Mike, it's Cindy. With regard to the chat questions here, you have one regarding foreigners who were, I guess it says, presented at the fair. Where did they live during the fair?
Okay. 2 different questions there that I'll try to address, and Larry or anybody else can chip in on this. One is that it's estimated that there were 5,000 or 6,000 people who lived on the fairgrounds essentially for most of the duration of the fair. This included the peoples that were put on display from the Filipinos and the Native Americans and the Ainu from Japan. It included some custodians, I'll call them, of all the state and foreign pavilions that would be there to host them in the morning. They ate on the fairgrounds. There were some probably sleeping quarters in all of the state and foreign buildings for them. Same thing with the Pike. The people that operated all of the Pike concessions probably had a dozen or so people each, depending on the concession, that just stayed on the fairgrounds. There was plenty of restaurants to eat. The Pike shut down along about I think 11 o'clock at night or so, a couple hours after sunset. But there were all sorts of different bunches of people. It wouldn't surprise me if the administration building didn't have a couple of beds in it for people like David R. Francis and some of his directors who would finish up work at, go to a banquet, get back to their office at 10, 11 o'clock at night, go through some paperwork, grab 3 or 4 or 5 hours of sleep and have to get up early the next morning for something going on, rather than spend half an hour commuting, or 45 minutes getting back to his house. It wouldn't surprise me if some of them didn't end up sleeping on the fairgrounds.
There were bivouac soldiers too.
Oh, yes, yes. There were the West Point cadets. I think there were 150 or so of them, and other National Guard and Army troops from different states that came to the fair. Think of all the restaurants that were there, the barbecue places and the cafeterias and stuff like that.
Mike, Nancy Hardesty wants to know whether people could touch or ring the Liberty Bell, or was it just there to ring at ceremonial times, if at all?
I believe by 1904, and I'd have to research this a little bit more, that they became much more protective of the Liberty Bell, and it was guarded, I think, 24/7. I'd have to research it. I know it's on the Wikipedia page for the Liberty Bell.
Mike?
I think it went to the 1893 World's Fair and the 1901 Buffalo Fair. And the fact that people were allowed to touch it and stuff for years, I think they figured out that the Liberty Bell had a number of scrapings taken off of it by all sorts of different people. So they weren't, I think by 1904, they weren't going to allow anybody to touch it, especially with a fingernail or something sharp.
Mike, we do have that one photograph, though, taken in St. Louis in 1904 of that little boy who's standing right next to it. I think he's got a hand propped up on it or his elbow or something.
Yeah, he looks like a Buster Brown, doesn't he?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, it probably wasn't like a religious relic that nobody touched, but at the same time, it was
Irreplaceable.
yeah. Okay, so we looked at this one. I'm trying to see if there's another Ferris wheel picture I can get a hold of here. You're still seeing my screen, halfway done Ferris wheel?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Hey, Mike,
Yeah,
you might mention a couple of men that were killed. One was killed when a man dropped a heavy screw or something and hit another man down on the ground and killed him.
right. There were 2 or 3 or 4 people that died from the axle in St. Louis. One of them, I think the day after the wheel opened, was greasing the axle and
That's right.
he fell. And then a month or so later, somebody dropped a bolt or a small piece of steel that was maybe a foot or 2 long. Of course, when you drop something from 100 and some odd feet up high and it hits you somewhere around the head and shoulders, it's not going to be pretty sight. And there was, I think, a big issue about, he was clearly dead, but they wanted to get the body out of the way quick, and they had to wait an hour or so for the coroner to get there.
Yeah.
This is still zooming in to show you this guy standing on the Ferris wheel out here.
Mike, do you have some of the pictures of the ladders that they were climbing?
Yes, this is a good one to show. Thank you for reminding me. I was just seeing that. So if you see where this guy is standing right here on one of the beams, and you go over about 2 vertical pieces of wood, you can see that the one I'm moving the cursor, my mouse, up and down on, you can see it has little cross members.
Mhm.
That's a ladder.
Wow.
That's how you would climb
Wow.
up on the tower to get to work to put these beams together. So
Well, that might be how you're going to do it, but I'm not doing it.
And this tower was a little bit taller than the axle height. So if that's 125 feet, this has got to be 135 or 40 feet. But can you imagine going up a ladder of, 2x4s or something, probably hopefully more than nailed onto a big vertical piece of wood, but having to climb straight up 120 or 30 feet to get up here to put that stuff together?
No.
I can't.
Hey, Mike, what are those ridges? What are those ridges on the left side?
Sorry, what now on the left?
So there's ridges on the left side of the man on the edges of the bar.
These little grooves?
Yeah.
Okay, I can answer that. I've learned that from Steve Schmitz, pardon me. On each of these straight members of iron, they put a slightly curved piece of steel on that was thicker in the middle and thinner at the joint so that the edge would be round. These were sprockets that essentially a bicycle chain would engage at the bottom of the Ferris wheel to make the Ferris wheel go around.
Oh, interesting.
Oh, okay.
And in our Ferris wheel presentation, we do have a picture of that. It would take me a few minutes to find, though. That is what you were talking about, was these little teeth
Yeah.
or edge of the wheel.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, rather than have a belt go all the way around it, they decided easier to put teeth on the outside edge of it and drive it at the bottom with basically a giant bicycle chain. Let's see, was there one or two more? We did that one. Oh, the lumber one. Now that Zoom is working, you still got that view of, the sunken garden lake?
Yes, yes.
Okay. So these are the pieces I was thinking were probably at least 8, if not 10 or 12 inches square and probably 20 feet long. I don't know how much each one of those weighed, but I can't imagine that 3 or 4 people even could carry that. They'd probably need some sort of mechanical assist. All of this planking, to put on flooring. Some bigger ones, some medium ones. Here's some smaller ones that are actually curving. These are probably, your regular 2x4s or 4x6s, but I bet you these are about 20 feet long. And now that you can see those and you can see all this construction that's already done to get up to this first level and then going up higher, and they haven't even gotten up to the roof level yet. Because in the distance, you can see another palace that's a little bit further along, and the roof level is probably right about here. This is a side of one of the big archways that was probably going to be built right here. And, when I see pictures like this, it just goes, can you imagine how many sawmills were busy from 1901 to 1903 cutting down trees and stuff like that? And I just got a battery low warning thing. Give me 1 minute and I'll go get my power supply. Okay, folks, I'm back. I'm going to be plugging in. Does anybody have any other questions?
Hey, Mike, this is Yvonne.
Yeah.
Going back to the Liberty Bell, I was in Philadelphia in 1975, and
Yeah.
I believe I touched the Liberty Bell back then. I don't think it was off limits to touch back then.
Yeah, in middle school on a field trip from New York, I touched the Liberty Bell. And I was in middle school back in the early 70s as well.
Mike, can you hear me?
Yeah.
This is what the wood they used was longleaf yellow pine,
Yeah.
and the woods were full of them. There are none in Missouri left. And if you go up and down the river, the lumber people have built mansions just at the, on the, by that fair, what they did.
Huh.
Any other questions or any other pictures you want to see?
Mike, those cases behind you, is that all World's Fair memorabilia in there?
Ah.
Right.
Yeah. Did you answer that question?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
We have, if they want to see some wood from floors on our kitchen floor. Yeah.
Oh, you tell them.
Mike, there is one more question in the chat box from Diane, who asks, wouldn't it have been easier to construct, and I think she's talking about the Ferris wheel, from the base and then rotate the finished portions upward?
I have thought about that, and for years I thought that's probably how they did it, that they would basically just start constructing at the bottom and make the thing spin. But they weren't able to, knowing now how they spun it, with the chain and sprocket mechanism, that would have been really hard to do and put a whole lot of stress on it. They kind of kept it somewhat balanced, I think, not too far out of whack as they went up, and it had brakes on it, to hold it in place, etc. But they had constructed it twice before. It was originally built at the Chicago World's Fair site. It was taken down and rebuilt in North Chicago by a different company. And then the Chicago House Wrecking Company took it apart there and they put it together down here, probably having all sorts of detailed plans on how to do it. And I forget how many pieces. There's a couple 100,000 different pieces of steel, nuts and bolts and stuff like that they brought down here, and of course the axle, and put it all back together. And I think they had a plan. They had steel workers who were brave enough to do that, and kind of like building the arch. They certainly could have had a lot more people die, but only a few did, and no one died building the arch. So that's what worked, and they got it built, I think, in about 2 months. I think it was in the middle or end of February when they came to a contractual agreement to bring it down here, and the LPE company cut a deal with them to take less profit so that the company would be able to recoup their expenses to build it, since they were taking it apart, moving it, and rebuilding it. So they took a lower profit margin from the operation of the Ferris wheel, and I think everybody was happy.
I got a question.
Yeah.
The Washington State building, it's like a teepee. Did anyone ever find out what happened to those beams? I had heard they were put in a lumber yard in St. Louis, but then I didn't hear any more.
No, it was taken.
I heard that Buyers Lumber out there in U City, right on Olive at the Interbelt, used to have, well, they may still have it, a really long timber. And the man told me, this was a long time ago, that the story was that it was from the World's Fair, and it might have been from the Washington State Pavilion. So if anybody gets a chance to go out to Buyers Lumber, take a look in the yard and see if you see that long chunk of lumber.
Thanks, Diane.
Speaking of lumber, something that got into a discussion, I think, on Facebook with somebody who posted something. There was a 11 or 12 foot diameter section of a tree that was about 30 feet long. I think from, was it Washington, Larry, or Oregon? I forgot which, that was cut up and it was going to be shipped to the fair and put on display. And it had a cage on one end. They had carved out the middle of it. And inside that cage, it had alternating either a mountain lion and or a bear. It had an office area that was carved into it, and it rode on a specially designed set of railroad trucks, and it was going to come to the fair. And there was a big article about it in the newspaper that it's on its way. It had left, Washington or Oregon, and it was going to get here. And then it got as far as, I don't remember, was it Wisconsin or something, Larry? It escapes me, but you found some newspaper articles. And then there's nothing after that. It's like it never went any further. It was put on display in some city park, and it never got here, I think.
Yeah, and local newspapers along the way would have stories about it, so you could find those stories, and then nothing at the fair or near the fair.
Well, it is true that there was a office built inside the Washington building that was 12 feet wide in a circle, and but there's no reason to believe that it was that shipment that. But the office was 12 feet and it was carved out of one tree trunk.
Right. So it's alleged that the timbers in the Washington State Building, the 6 or maybe 8 timbers, some 110 feet long that met up at the top,
Yeah.
were single pieces of lumber that went up to make the teepee, essentially.
They were.
I'm not 100% sure that that's the case.
Everything I've read on it is that they took it back, the whole thing, and rebuilt it in a park. But just a few years after that, it rotted out, and they didn't want to put it back together again.
Oh, that's too bad.
Our son lives in the state of Washington, and we have talked to many people there, and that's what they all say, that they did put it on a train and bring it back, and it stood for a while, and then it was gone. It was in a state park.
And there may have been a newspaper article I seem to recall hearing about. I don't think I ever saw that there was some discussion about leaving it where it was in Forest Park to be used as something or other, but the state owned it and it was their right to take it if they wanted it.
They took it back on a train.
Okay.
If anyone would like to see some of the longleaf yellow pine from the World's Fair, you can come and look at our kitchen floor.
Really?
Yeah. We have it.
It was part of the inside in.
No, it was an old store. They sold, obviously, they sold the wood, the lumber, from things, and this was they made a store out of it in the small town of Missouri, which I have it written down, but I can't think of it now. And just on the internet, I think there's some of the older members remember this, and we contacted the man and went into the city it was Kansas City, to see the wood, and he had all the authorization and where it came from. It was just an old grocery store in a small town that was made out of it, and we bought the pine, and now it's on our kitchen floor.
Nice.
Well,
Shara, is it pretty?
I'm sorry?
It's beautiful. I've seen it. I've walked on it.
Oh.
It's pretty cool.
Well,
another remnant of the fair.
It's beautiful wood. But now it's got all the marks that a kitchen floor would have on it. It's got lots of dents.
Couple stains here and there.
Yeah, lots of pots and pans falling. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, with that, let me kind of wrap this up. We've been going on for a while, but I do want to let everybody know that we are planning on another Zoom meeting next month on Thursday, March 18th. Sally Carter, who may be still online here, I'm not sure. Sally works at the Hockey Museum in Lafayette, Indiana. And she has told us she's working on a presentation about Indiana at the fair. Sally, are you still here or online? Can you unmute and tell us?
Yes, I am here. I'm not an employee of the museum. I'm a volunteer at the museum. I do want to clarify that.
Okay.
But yes, Indiana did really well at the fair. When I started researching this a couple years ago, when we celebrated at the museum the 115th anniversary of the fair, I was just really amazed at all the stuff we did. There were some local people involved. So it was just fun stuff to find.
Well, that's great. We're looking forward to that, and we'll plan on doing it at, I think you had asked to go a little bit earlier since you're on Eastern time, aren't you? It's 8:30.
Yes.
9:30 over there in Indiana?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. So
You know, Mike, it might be a good idea to contact some of the other places that are remnants from the fair in Kansas, in Lindsborg, Kansas, for the
Swedish building.
Swedish building, yes, thank you. The Swedish building, and down in Oklahoma, maybe the folks down there in El Reno would talk about the Oklahoma building. You know, they might, you get it right from the source and we could all see it, and the folks don't even have to travel.
That's cool. I like that idea.
that's a great idea, Diane. Do you think you could make a little list and maybe see if you could drum up some initial email contacts?
I can make a little list. Yeah, and you know, there's some houses down in San Antonio that was the Idaho building, and they split it in half and made two houses that sit side by side. I don't know if those owners would be open to talking about their homes, but that'd be kind of neat.
Could be.
I'd appreciate anything you could do in that, Diane. And if you get a contact that knows that, you know, a little bit about this, it would be great to see if they could, you know, do what Sally's doing, because it doesn't take a whole, you know, like the Swedish building is now part of a school, I think, isn't it?
Well, it was part of a school. It's now in the Smoky Valley Historical Society Park. And, you know, there, what was that woman's name, Yvonne? Leona Lyman or something like that. And she was the curator. If she's still there, you know, she would, it's part of her job to kind of talk about what they have. So that might be kind of cool.
Mm-hmm.
I agree.
You know? Yeah, Indiana. Oh, Theodore Roosevelt's cabin is in North Dakota at the Theodore Roosevelt National Park. I'm sure a park ranger would love to tell us all about that. So, yeah.
Sounds like you could get a program up of 2 or 3 or 4 of these, you know, and maybe have a little shorts thing, and you could do the slides and they could talk about them.
Well, no, they can do the slides and talk about it.
Are you delegating authority again, Mike?
Yeah, Diane doesn't want any more projects right now. But I'll come up with ideas, so.
Well, Mike doesn't either. We're going to figure out what we can do, you know, going into April and May for meetings, whether we continue with Zoom, and I think these are good. We'll keep you posted through the bulletin and website and emails to our members. If you're not a member of the society, please consider joining. Our membership form is on our website. The in-person meetings are a lot more fun than this, although this one, you know, went pretty good, starting at 7 and, you know, an hour and a half. You know,
Mike, remind us what our website address is for those not familiar.
okay. www.1904 World's Fair Society, all one word, Or you can just Google 1904 World's Fair Society and it'll probably find it. You'll probably find it. And if you're not in our Facebook group, which has over 4,000 members, and you have any interest in the fair, you ought to be in that group because there's a lot of interesting discussions and sometimes some research, and there's people posting memorabilia, sometimes besides spoons. And
By the way, where is Jerry? I didn't see him
Jerry, are
here.
you here? I didn't see you on the list.
Yeah, I didn't see him either.
Oh, I'll have to get after him.
Yeah. And Jana, who is that behind you on your shoulders or on the back of your chair?
That is the Cole Kitty. He's named after Cole Porter.
Aw.
I name my pets after gas composers. I also have Quincy for Quincy Jones, and I have Johnny for Johnny Mercer.
Just for the record, Cole Porter's from Indiana.
That's right. That's right. He is Peru, Indiana.
The circus capital of the world.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Okay, folks, I'm not going to chase you out. We'll keep this open for another 10 or 15 minutes or so for general chat, but I'm going to declare the official part of the meeting is over. Hope to see you next month, and hopefully I'll figure out how to do this with times a little bit better organized so that if you do sign in early, you go to the waiting room and, we'll send you messages. For those of you that went to the waiting room, did you see the message that popped up in the waiting room?
Yes.
I did.
Good.
Yes.
Okay.
I really enjoy these Zoom meetings. So good to see all the people I haven't seen for months. Yeah.
I agree, Shara.
Yeah. Charles Kaler, are you still online, charter member? I haven't seen you in a long time.
Oh yeah, still here. Yeah. Haven't done the tour course though all of last year because of the pandemic. We're hopefully going to be doing it in the fall, maybe. Who knows? So we'll see.
Charles, I have a question. Do you have any people named Ed Kaler?
Ed, there is a cousin that I have by that name, but there's
Is he a cartoonist?
no.
Oh, okay, different guy.
Sorry.
Hey, Charles, do you still have your 3D
That was the
blue one, but the 3D with the
presentation. Yeah.
That would be a good presentation on Zoom.
I would love to see that. I can always remember the first time seeing that. I was in the front row, and when you projected up the left and right images on the screen, looking down the Art Hill and the Cascades, I swear there was a drop of water right out here that I thought I could grab.
Yeah. Well, the only thing is that people would need to wear the glasses. That's the challenge. So.
Oh yes, I never thought about that.
Be a challenge.
I like Diane's idea of bringing places around the country. I think that would really, it's perfect for us for Zooming. And I think that'd be really interesting. Thanks, Diane. That was great.
Well, I'll try and get a little list together, 2 or 3 at least. So yeah.
In our traveling the all-state capitals, almost every one of them had a example of what was exhibited at the World's Fair.
Oh, yeah.
Beautiful things. We happened to have been at the Smithsonian, and part of the display was jewelry, and fantastic pieces they had that were exhibited at the World's Fair.
Cool. Yeah.
In Laramie, Wyoming Museum, the Native American Museum up there, they won an apple. They had an apple that was given to them. I've forgotten why. It's been really many years since I was there for that. And it was given to them from the World's Fair. They whether because they participated or I can't remember quite, but it was in Laramie. And it was really kind of unusual for me to see that there that day. So I thought that was kind of fun. You never know where something lands.
Was it golden or, I mean?
No, it was red,
brass
if
or-
I recall, like an apple. Yeah, it was something with apple. I guess we could contact the museum. Mhm.
That's something for you to do, Reva.
Oh, yeah, okay, right now. I'm doing schoolwork right now. Oh, God. I have to learn a whole new way how to give a test. It's been very challenging, very challenging. So we'll see what happens in 2 weeks. Oh,
I have a question.
Take care.
yeah.
How come some of us just have a profile picture and we're not live?
You don't have your camera on.
Do you have the camera on your computer, Denny?
Yeah,
Or maybe you're dead and you just don't know it.
yeah. It is an old
I'm
computer.
sorry, that bad girl.
I know several other
Denny,
people
along the
have-
bottom where the chat is, the
Yeah,
left should be mute. And my next one says stop video. I wonder if you ever got your video working.
I have a start video.
Well, click on it.
Click on start video. Yeah.
Start video.
Oh,
It's not doing anything.
yeah, you're blank.
Oh, it goes black.
Yeah.
If I
I
go into participant and you can look and see if your video is on or not. If you scroll down, Art's got his off. And, oh, wait a minute, here, close that. And if you press that little video, that'll bring it to you too, because I've done that before where I couldn't get on. David's is off and Eileen's is off, Jackie.
A lot of
If they're gray on my screen, then people can get on your video, but you can work it from participants and the one. My stuff's all at the top because I'm on my iPad. So
I noticed next to my name, I have like a camera and a microphone. But when I put the cursor over, it just says mute and more.
oh, see,
More, Danny.
okay, I've got touch screen, so I'm touching the screen because I'm on my iPad.
Click
But
on
that's
more.
what I-
You may have the option to turn video on or off.
All it says is rename and edit profile picture.
The other way is you're in a gallery with several other people, your own individual gallery picture up on the right-hand side has 3 dots. Put your cursor towards the upper right-hand side where the 3 dots are. There's an option to mute, and then there's the dots. Click on the dots.
I don't see that. The only dots I see is it says